welcome to PC Voyage. I'm Rainey Laviolette.
And I'm Andrew Doty.
That was very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. On this week's show, we have Steve Pubeni from Stat Microservice, if I got that right.
Yes, you did.
Oh, good. Oh, good. And Donald Lee Duprell with PC Voyage News.
So, Rainey, let me ask you a question.
No.
What do you do when you have a problem with your machine, and what's the first thing you generally try to do? Do you try to take it apart and isolate it, or
if I can't figure it out myself, I call you. And when you become totally useless, then I have to go to somebody like Steve. And in fact, I called him recently with a problem it wasn't me that was having it, but it was a friend that was having a problem. And he was able to find what he needed and work through the problem.
Well, you've got a definite chain of people that you go.
You have to. You have to. If you don't know who to talk to or who to ask, you may never solve the problem.
I think it's a good thing. You really should get a network going. Get a lot of get to know people. Introduce yourself to a lot of people, because you never know when you may have a problem. You may have to get it taken care of, and you can always call a person.
Andy's in the book. Call him.
On that note,
go ahead.
I'd like to just introduce Steve Pubeni from Stat Microservice.
No. We're not doing that first.
We're not?
No, we're doing the trivia question first.
Okay.
Why don't you do that first?
Okay. Here's Donald Lee Duprell with the PC Voyage News.
The trivia question! Can we kill him?
Just keep it rolling. Okay. Why don't you do it?
The trivia question.
Okay. Here's Jeff with the PC Voyage trivia question. Jeff?
Here are this week's computer trivia questions. Number 1. How much memory does each disk buffer use? And number 2. What is the name of the hidden file that tells your computer if a disk is a system disk?
Well, we're back. I hope we had the right segment in there after you screwed that one up so many times. Tonight we have Steve Pubeni, as I mentioned earlier, from Stat Microservice in West Springfield, to talk about care and maintenance of your PC. Hello, Steve.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Good. Glad to have you back.
Well, it's good to be here.
We know.
Well, everybody says that,
Such
right?
modesty.
No, not everybody.
Well, earlier in the show you mentioned that sometimes you have problems with computers, and where do they go for answers? Hopefully, by people watching the show today, they're going to learn a few tips of their own, and maybe they'll be able to solve some of their own problems.
And if they can't, they'll come and see you.
That sounds fine to me. What I hope to do today is to talk about some of the common problems people have with PCs and some of the steps you can do to either avoid the problem before it starts or to be able to do some initial troubleshooting on your own before you have to make that call. So that's what we plan on talking about tonight.
All right. What's the biggest problem that people have when they call you?
The biggest problem people have when they call me is they may have already done too much.
Okay.
In other words, they've had an initial problem and they've tried to solve it themselves using some steps that may not have been the most logical, and what's happened is they've got themselves in worse trouble. So that's common. So I would say, when in doubt, make a phone call.
What kind of problems do people run into? When you say they do too much, what do you mean?
Well, let me give you a simple example. Most PC-compatible computers today have a battery inside of them. And just like the battery inside your car, the battery inside your flashlight, it's going to die. And when that happens, your computer is going to lose the setup information. What I find is that once that happens, people suspect they have a major computer problem and start tearing the computer apart and pulling out parts or trying to reinstall software. Before you know it, they've taken this minor battery problem and have created a major repair for themselves. So there's just a typical example I see on a weekly basis.
And I know that that's something that I've done actually, and I think everybody here has had the same problem at one time or another.
What's probably the most common problem that you seem to come across? Is it burnt out monitors, or is it bad hard drives, or what?
I wouldn't, computers today are such that they're very modular, and I can't honestly point to one particular component that's an aha, I got you. We see so many different types of problems that it's hard to really narrow it down to one particular category or class of equipment. I would say the key thing in trying to decide what you have for a computer problem is to try to determine whether you have a hardware problem or a software problem. Computers, while they're high-tech like copiers and fax machines, also have a very unique personality. In a copy or a fax machine, you simply push a button and the machine does its task. A computer, however, will change its function depending on the program it's running. So you may find that if the program goes astray, the computer is going to go astray. So I would say the most common difficulty that an end user has that is not well experienced is a difficulty determining whether they have a hardware problem or a software problem.
Let me ask you another question. I get a lot of questions. Do surge suppressors really, are they really useful? Should people really get them? Should they spend a little bit of money or a lot of money on them, or does it make a difference?
Well, that's a good question. I would say surge suppressors are certainly necessary, but certainly shouldn't be considered as the only device used to control the power or protect the power supply. One of the problems with surge suppressors, and this is probably what you're asking, Andy, is I see some in the store for $5 and I see some that are $100. And yes, there is a difference. Typically, what you find with the lower cost surge suppressors is that they'll only protect you in case 1 or 2 surges. And what happens is after that, the surge suppressors actually blow out. The difficulty with that is when they blow out, they don't stop the flow of electricity to your computer. So what happens is these devices become useless, but you don't know they're useless. With the more expensive surge suppressors, what you find is that they have some monitoring circuitry in there so that you have an indication of when the suppressor is not working properly and you know to replace it. So there's a long answer to your question, but that's the difference.
You were talking about upgrades, and I know we've all put in memory chips or extra drives or extra cards so that people don't have problems. What specifically would you recommend to them to be extra careful of?
Well, I think someone tuning in today is going to get probably the best tip I have to offer here, and that is not to be overly ambitious when you decide to do an upgrade. Many people will hold off making changes to their computer and try to group those changes all at once. What they'll do is say, well, I want to upgrade my version of DOS and perhaps put on a mouse and maybe even add more memory. And what they do is they plan this a whole Saturday to do this upgrade. And what they do is they put all of the pieces into the pie at once, turn it on, and the machine doesn't work. Now, what you've done in the case I've just illustrated is come up with 3 variables. You've perhaps added a new version of DOS, you added a mouse, and you've upgraded memory. And when the computer doesn't work, you don't know which one of those things caused the problem. What I recommend people to do is, fine, plan your Saturday to do the upgrade, but first install the DOS. Stop, put the computer together, test it, make sure it works. Then add the memory. Again, put the computer back together, make sure it works. And finally add the mouse. Again, put the computer, make sure it works. So anywhere along that line, if they run into a problem, they know what step the problem was caused by. It's all too often when people come into my office with a box, and inside the box is all the things they tried to put into the computer, and we have to try to figure out which one of those things were defective.
So just use a little common sense when you're...
Take your time and plan it, don't rush it, and just make that extra effort of testing after each piece is installed.
What about cleaning your system? Now you've got all these parts in there, and should you clean your system?
Well, you should, and I brought along a couple of things tonight, and I'll show one here. What I brought along is a power supply from a computer. And what I wanted to point out specifically on the power supply is that there are vents here. And these vents are used to draw cool air into the power supply when the computer is operating. Now, you ask, should you clean it? And the reason is yes, because as the computer is operating, dust from the air is pulled inside the computer and will block these vents. Once these vents are blocked, the operating temperature of the power supply and the computer will go up, and the hotter a computer runs, the more likely it is to have some component failure. So yes, you certainly should keep your computer clean. Some people will go out and buy a dust cover, and they're well-meaning, but the dust doesn't get into the computer when the power is off. The dust goes into the computer when the power is on, because that's when the fan is circulating the air.
So does a dust cover have any functionality then at that point?
It does, but what I'm saying is don't buy it for the wrong reason. I did have one customer that had dust covers religiously on all their equipment, and they had the unfortunate accident of a sprinkler system going off. And the dust covers literally saved many pieces of equipment because they acted like raincoats. But it didn't do anything for the dust, but it did keep the rain or the water out of the computer.
Computer condoms.
Yeah. Interesting. Protection against virus. Is static a major player against the PC in today's society? Should you take
Well, I don't know if
should you take care when working on your PC?
I don't know how it affects society, Andy, but I will, I will say that...
Andy's on a different level than the rest of us.
I will say this, that obviously static comes into play at different seasons. Whenever it's dry and you move into the winter seasons, obviously static is a much bigger problem than when you have a lot of humidity in the summer. Also, computers today are becoming more and more plastic on the case. And you can't discharge a static shock against plastic. So what I'm saying is that when you're operating your computer, static is usually not a problem. But if you decide to go inside or do one of these upgrades we talked about, you do have to be careful of static. In our office, we use something that's called an anti-static wrist strap. And basically, this is a conductive strap that you put on your wrist, and there's a little cable that attaches. And you plug this into, say, the third prong of the wall outlet. Of course, you have to make sure your electrical outlet is properly grounded, because you certainly wouldn't want to electrocute yourself. But what this does is drains the static away from your body, and so you don't have to worry about static problems. Many of the components in there are static sensitive. Now, if you don't have one of these, or what they call an anti-static workstation, the next best thing to do is inside your computer, you have this power supply again, and it's metal. And you should touch your hand to the case to make sure that you discharge any static that's on you. And as long as you keep a hand on the power supply or a metal portion of the computer while you're working, that would help keep static away and you can work safely. Also, use common sense. Don't wear a wool sweater when you're doing an upgrade on a computer.
But won't touching the power supply only help if the computer itself is plugged in?
Well, I think there's two schools of thought on that. I go back to when I was a kid and I'd walk through Sears and I'd scuff my foot on the rug and then go touch the displays and get a static shock. And they're not plugged in, so I think that you'll still discharge that way.
What about hard drives?
Well, what I wanted to talk about hard drives is first let me raise up the hard drive so you can get a look at what's on the inside of one. I brought this one from our office. It's a functional hard drive that has a glass cover over it. Most of them don't. Most of them are sealed. And what I wanted to talk about specifically with hard drives is to let you know about a couple problems that exist. One of the most common problems we see with hard drives is a problem known as a stiction problem. And a stiction problem is when the head of the disk drive will actually stick to the platters that revolve inside of it. And once it sticks, the drive will not spin. So a common problem is that people turn on their computer, their hard drive isn't working, and they panic. And they think they have a serious hard drive problem, when it could just be a minor adjustment because these platters are sticking. So again, it's a matter of calling first, talking with somebody who's familiar with computers to try to determine whether it's a serious problem or not and not overreacting.
So that's something that could be repaired?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, not only are we concerned with the repair of the computer, but we're also concerned with the data that's on that drive. And 9 out of 10 times we can get the data off if there's a drive with a stiction problem.
I've had some drives where it would have been that 10th time.
Yeah. We wish you could do backups. See, there's a good point. Do backups. Do
That's
backups.
right.
What about care and maintenance of the peripherals? Let's say the monitor, for instance, or perhaps the printer.
Well, we can talk a bit about the monitor, which is going to take all of about 10 seconds, and then we'll move into printers. Basically, with a monitor, there's no moving parts in there. There's extremely high voltages that can literally kill you. So I would not recommend doing any maintenance on the monitor aside from a little
Didn't you
Windex.
open your monitor up tonight and just play around in there?
No thanks.
As far as printers go, certainly that's the area of the computer system that's going to be the most likely to fail. Why? Well, it's got the most moving parts. There's very few moving parts inside of a computer, and the printer has more moving parts than any other. So you're definitely going to see more trouble there. Some of the problems that I see is that people use printers for years and years and years, and number one, don't change the ribbon. And I don't know if people are aware of this, but not only is there ink in a ribbon, but there is also a lubricant that will lubricate the needles on a printhead and give that printhead longer service life. So that's a very simple thing to do, is keep a good ribbon in the printer. Another thing is the printhead moves back and forth on a carriage, and that carriage over time will dry out. When you purchase your printer new, the carriage is lubricated and the printhead moves freely. Over time you'll get dust collecting in there, the oil will dry out, and also once in a while we use a light machine oil in our office. We put a few drops on the carriage, move the head back and forth, of course with the power off, and that'll also reduce the friction in the printer and give it a longer service life as well.
What about cleaning of a printer?
Well, as far as cleaning, what I find is that a vacuum cleaner will work if you want to get in there with a small hose. And again, always unplug it from the wall. You don't want to do this with the power on. But more importantly, if you have a vacuum at home that has a reversible hose where you can blow air out, pressurized air would be much more effective at getting the dirt out. And one other thing I'll mention about cleaning is that the platen, which is the part of the printer where the paper rests against, should be cleaned. And you don't want to clean it with alcohol. A lot of people use alcohol because it removes ink off the platen. While it's true it does remove ink, it also hardens the rubber of the platen, and that causes a poorer print image. There is solvents that are available that are made specifically for rubber that soften the rubber and remove the ink. Most of these solvents come from the printing industry, where they've been using rubber rollers for many, many years. So we're seeing some of those solvents being used in computers.
I know you brought a diagram about printer with labels.
Okay, well, I know before we went on the air here, you were telling me this little story happened to you, so I thought I'd share another.
To just about everybody.
Well, I think I wanted,
especially if you're dealing with labels.
I want to share this little trick with some of your viewers out there today. And it's a very simple illustration, but let me just take a minute to show you what we have here. Thank you. What I've got diagrammed is, this is the rear of the printer. And this dotted line here represents the path of paper. Over here we have a paper guide, which keeps the paper resting against the rubber platen. One of the problems is when you print mailing labels, normally mailing labels will go through the printer in a forward direction. And what some people will do to try to save themselves about 5 cents worth of labels is to try to crank that back and move those labels back out through the rear of the printer. What happens is the label will invariably get caught on the paper guide. When that happens, the label gets stuck under the platen, and while I show this as only a few components, there are literally several gears, plastic covers, and it's almost impossible to get that out yourself. And typically, that's a $37.50 to $75 service call for 10 cents worth of labels. So I say, tear it off back here, feed the labels through in the forward direction, and don't worry about those 5 cents worth of labels. So there's my tip on labels.
Again, I guess I'm tight or something. I don't know.
I think that's happened to everybody. I think everybody's tried that. What about floppy drives? What about should you clean the floppy drive? Should you get these floppy cleaning diskettes in the stores?
Well, many people will bring in a computer to me and say they have a floppy drive problem. And they said, well, I put a disk cleaning kit in. And when they do that, they expect the disk cleaning kit to be the miracle solution. And it really isn't. Let me take a minute just to tell you what a disk cleaning kit does. All a disk cleaning kit does is polishes the read-write heads of the disk drive. Now that's important because the read-write heads are what actually pull the data off of that diskette. However, there are sensors in there are gears in there that don't get cleaned by a disk cleaning kit. And if you're not cleaning your computer on an annual basis, I guarantee there is dust in those gears, there's dust in those sensors. And what's going to happen is you're going to have clean heads and a dirty drive, and you're still going to have problems.
Well, Steve, I think we've all pretty much seen some things we've done, I know that, and some things that we probably should not do.
That's right.
Some words of wisdom from a person who obviously is well educated in this industry. If you'd like to reach Steve Fuveni, you can reach him at Stat Microservice. 168 South Boulevard, West Springfield, Mass. 01089. His number is 733-2175. Thanks, Steve. And next up, Chip with our trivia answer.
Did good. It's going to give you lots of time, too.
Yeah.
Here are this week's computer trivia answers. Number 1. Each disk buffer uses 532 bytes. And number 2. The boot record tells your computer if a disk is a system disk.
Oh, hi. The countdown came a little quick. You know, one of the things in Steve's conversation that kind of reminded me of something that I do, and I only do this with my dot matrix printers. My laser printer would be a little heavy, but sometimes I'll take the thing, turn it upside down, and shake it. Watch all the dust fall to the ground. Obviously, I'm sure that's not a very good thing to do, but I do it anyway. You know.
Well, it's not a good thing to do if you drop the printer. It's definitely not a good thing to do.
Most printers aren't that heavy that I think I'm going to drop them. Now here's Donald Lee Duprell with the PC Voyage News.
A report in PC Week states that Intel is preparing to introduce a 486 microprocessor with built-in multimedia capabilities. The trade publication states that the chip will incorporate Intel's Digital Video Interactive DVI technology. The CPU will allow users to take advantage of full-motion video capabilities without purchasing add-in chips or boards. PC Week reports that Intel is also working on a software-based version of DVI. DVI offers a full-screen 24-bit color video at 1024 by 768 dot resolution. It provides a 30 frame per second display rate. Intelligent Security Systems is offering FirmLock, a hardware package that allows PC owners to restrict access to a computer's display, keyboard, mouse, and floppy drive. To start a FirmLock-equipped PC, users must insert a key into a socket that's connected to the system parallel port and then enter a password. When the key is removed, FirmLock suspends any current application and disables the screen, keyboard, mouse, and floppy drive. FirmLock costs $250. Intelligent Security Systems is based in Addison, Texas. A group of computer and communications firms is protesting an amendment to the Senate Appropriations Bill. The amendment restricts an FCC proposal to allocate radio frequencies to wireless voice and data communications services. The Washington-based Wind Forum Group says it would delay the introduction of new wireless PC technologies. The Senate passed the bill in July. The amendment was included in response to complaints from current users of the frequencies. A corresponding House Appropriations bill doesn't contain the amendment. Wind Forum is urging Congress to reject the amendment in conference. Microsoft is moving into software territory that's currently the domain of third-party developers, reports PC Week. The trade publication notes that Microsoft's upcoming DOS 6.0 includes an antivirus program, a sophisticated backup program, a disk defragmenter, and a data compression software. PC Week says third-party publishers are looking to counter Microsoft's threat by developing better utilities. The publication also notes that some companies are enhancing the revenues by providing Microsoft with programs to include with DOS 6.0, despite the minimal royalties that software publisher is doling out. Quest for Glory 3, The Wages of War, a new PC adventure game, is available from Sierra Online. The game's players journey to an African village to battle an unspeakable evil that lies at the very heart of fear and violence, notes a statement from the Oakhurst, California-based publisher. Wits, might, and magic are required to defeat the enemy and restore peace. The game includes 6,000 lines of dialogue and over 60 characters. Quest for Glory 3, The Wages of War, supports a VGA graphics and all major sound cards. It costs $69.95. Portions of the PC Voyage News are courtesy of the Prodigy Services. I'm Donna Lee Duprell with the news.
Boy, as usual, Donna Lee did a great job.
Yeah, she definitely did. She definitely did. And now, Chip with the PC Voyage address.
You're
Chip?
finally going to get this right, huh?
Yeah.
All dressed up tonight?
If you have any questions, or if you have any comments about the show, please write to us. Our address is PC Voyage, P.O. Box 6295, Holyoke, Massachusetts, 01041. We appreciate hearing from you.
You know, one thing I'll never forget is the time that you and I tried to service my network on a Sunday. Remember that? Of course, as you know, nobody works on Sunday.
That's correct.
So it's very hard that if you have a problem, there's nobody you can call.
Although today there are 900 numbers, and I guess while some people may use them for other things, they do have 900 number network support, so you could always use that.
Yes, but like he said earlier, he's cheap. So I don't think we're going to call the 1-900 number.
I think our major accomplishment was that we happened to find somebody in an office, so we were all set. But I don't recommend really working on your computers on Sundays. Saturdays aren't so bad. I don't know if you work Saturdays or not, but...
No, but I'll tell you one little secret. In my business, I never book appointments for Monday morning. And the reason is because I know there's always people like you that have worked over the weekend, and the phone will ring on Monday morning.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dave.
That's it. On that note...
Well, one other comment is anytime you make any changes to your hardware or your computer at all, make a backup. It's the most important insurance policy and the easiest insurance policy
Definitely.
you can have for yourself.
Here
Now,
we go.
now you can finish.
On that note, I'm Andrew Doty.
And I'm Randy Laviolette.
Until next time.
See, that was very good. We did very good that time. Nice job.